Hi, I'm Elle, and today we're going to be talking about the gross state of Peta and being cruelty-free in the beauty industry. It's almost funny that Peta is in the news again right now thanks to them trashing the memory of the late, great Steve Irwin on his birthday. But originally, the reason that I wanted to talk about this is thanks to this logo. I see it all over the place, and to be honest, I didn't really think much about it until recently. I looked at the logo and just wondered who created it. When I found out that it was Peta, I literally saw red. Now, if some of you already know about how absolutely disgusting the so-called animal rights organisation Peta is, then a lot or even all of what I'm going to be talking about won't be new to you. But just as an aside, sometimes I think the drama channels presume that viewers know everything that we do, and I think it's important to go over things for everyone sometimes, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. But this isn't just about Peta. It's mostly about Peta, but it's also about how the beauty industry doesn't care about anything but trends to keep consumers happy and a whole lot more. But let's start right at the beginning. Over the past few years in particular, there's been a real push for makeup to be cruelty-free. But what does that even mean, right? It sounds good. No decent person wants cruelty to happen. So I ran a poll on my Twitter. I know, not the most scientific study in the universe. But I found that there are some people that see cruelty-free and presume that if products are called cruelty-free, then that must mean that no animals have come to any kind of harm in the making of those products. And that isn't true. Cruelty-free just means that the products haven't been tested on animals. Sometimes, maybe, if you're lucky. In Europe, animal testing for cosmetics has been banned since 2013, unless there's literally no other choice but to test on animals. Just on the 15th of February this year, the Australian Senate has moved towards banning animal testing for cosmetics, but the US has really been dragging its heels. California recently wrote the California Cruelty-Free Cosmetics Act into law, which will ban the sale of cosmetics and ingredients that have been tested on animals at the start of 2020. Mostly, sort of. I'll let this article explain. First, companies can continue to fund animal testing for products and ingredients sold in countries where such testing measures are required by law. As such, manufacturers can also keep selling those animal-tested products in California as long as they only funded those animal tests in order to be compliant with foreign regulations. China, the world's largest economy and a huge market for American beauty products, might be the biggest influence in this regard. The country is beginning to move away from animal testing, but currently still requires animal testing on all imported cosmetics. That means that companies selling cosmetics in China, including US-based conglomerates like Estee Lauder and Coty, will most likely continue funding animal tests. Furthermore, according to the California regulation, animal testing may still take place if both there are no non-animal alternative methods of testing and the need to conduct animal tests is justified and supported by a detailed research protocol proposed as the basis for the evaluation. At a national level, the US Food and Drug Administration, which regulates cosmetic safety but does not have the mandate to approve new products, does not require animal testing for cosmetics, but asks manufacturers to employ whatever testing is appropriate and effective to ensure safety. And this is California. We learned in a previous video that California is so sensitive that they regulate toast. But this is apparently the best that they can do for animal testing. But China has a massive market and the US naturally wants to trade with them. China is slowly improving thanks to an agreement with the Institute for In Vitro Sciences to help Chinese scientists move away from animal testing, but who knows how long that will take. In the meantime, there's this great big black hole of animal testing where beauty products that are sold in China have to be tested on animals to prove to the government that the products are safe. So, as great as this move tries to be, in the future you're still going to have to be really careful about brands being truly cruelty-free, because they'll be able to say that they adhere to California's cruelty-free laws and still be supporting animal testing if they sell to China. But this is where the cruelty-free trend comes in. We all know about trends in the beauty industry. It's like every industry. Companies only really care about making money, and the best way to do that is to make consumers like the brands themselves. Good products aren't enough when there are so many competitors, so the companies pander to different demographics instead. Without wanting to get too political, we'll all remember the tone-deaf Pepsi commercial when Kendall Jenner tried to capitalize on the Black Lives Matter movement. Everyone was talking about Black Lives Matter. Pepsi thought that they could win some brownie points by pretending to care, and it massively backfired. Just like Pepsi back in 2017, cosmetics companies today want you to believe that they care about animals. Being, or at least claiming to be, cruelty-free sells, especially when consumers are confused about what being cruelty-free actually means. Remember that little poll that I put up on Twitter? If we go back to the 25th of January, Glamour posted an article with a list of cruelty-free brands, including the line, essentially, cruelty-free means that no animals were hurt or killed in the creation of the products. For example, killing or harming animals to collect ingredients and, of course, testing products on them. And that's just plain wrong. For example, Wayne Goss's Anniversary Set Volume 2 brush set is made of goat hair and is still cruelty-free. I mean, we can have a debate over whether the goat hair is all somehow taken from the goats that shed hair naturally or in some other cruelty-free way, but it's practically impossible to tell where natural hair for makeup brushes comes from, because that information just isn't public. So, is the brush set really cruelty-free? Yes, because it wasn't tested on animals. It gets even more complicated when, further down in that same article, Glamour talks about real techniques. Glamour describes real techniques as cruelty-free, their products not tested on animals, but the company sells synthetic makeup brushes, and the company itself is entirely vegan. The way that brands and products are talked about is really confusing. It's no wonder that some consumers end up being confused about what cruelty-free really means, or how to even go about sticking to using products and brands that have nothing to do with animal products or testing. Being or not being cruelty-free is a lot more complicated than you'd originally think, and there's a lot that the average consumer can easily take for granted. The truth is that the best way for consumers to know whether a brand is cruelty-free or not is to trust an outside source that can certify whether something is cruelty-free or not. And this brings us all the way back to the little rabbit logo and the organisation behind it, Peta. A lot of people only recognise Peta as the name of an animal rights organisation, and that first thought is that, well, they have to be good, because caring about animals is a good thing. Other people, though, have been exposed to Peta sounding like a parody of an animal rights organisation. Back in December, Peta unironically wanted to swap out animal-based idioms so that they were somehow less cruel. According to them, bring home the bacon is somehow anti-animal and should be replaced with bring home the bagels. It's insane, and it's more cringeworthy than my entire channel. But Peta didn't stop there. After they tried to say that words mattered, they had the audacity to continue with, just as it became unacceptable to use racist, homophobic or ableist language, phrases that trivialise cruelty to animals will vanish as more people begin to appreciate animals for who they are and start bringing home the bagels instead of the bacon. That's right! The animal-based equivalent of someone saying break a leg when they're due to act on stage is exactly the same as people shouting racist, homophobic and ableist abuse, apparently. Pettus started out with the right idea because words do matter, but comparing a meaningless, inoffensive saying with the likes of the N-word is disgusting. If you didn't see that Pettus' official account was attached to this, you really would think that it was some kind of troll laughing at animal rights activists. Considering the backlash faced by the likes of Laura Lee when racist tweets from 2012 resurfaced, it should be a no-brainer that brands should want to steer clear of a group that spreads bigotry. Brands are constantly slammed for not being thoughtful or sensitive to minority consumers and influencers, but right now, they're proud of working with Peta. But that insensitive comment comparing bigotry to something trivial isn't the only reason that no brand should ever even breathe near Peta. Back in 2008, the Autism Advocacy Network fought to have this vile billboard by Peta removed, as you can see from this partial statement. A link to the whole statement is linked below. I honestly do not have the words to explain how much I hate that billboard. But, naturally, Peta's original online article to go with that billboard was even worse. Autism is a brain disorder that causes sufferers to have extreme difficulty communicating and relating to others. It is often marked by antisocial behaviour like screaming and obsessive repetition of actions, which takes an enormous emotional toll on sufferers and their families. Peta has created a billboard to alert the public to the connection between this devastating disease and dairy product consumption. More research is needed, but scientific studies have shown that many autistic kids improve dramatically when put on a diet free of dairy foods. One study of 20 children found that a major reduction in autistic behaviour in kids who were put on a casein-free diet. Casein is a component of cow's milk. And another study done by researchers at the University of Rome showed a marked improvement in the behaviour of autistic children who were taken off dairy products. The reason why dairy foods may worsen or even cause autism is being debated. Some suspect that casein harms the brain, while others suggest that the gastrointestinal problems so often caused by dairy products cause distress and thus worsen behaviour in autistic children. The article is still up on their website, although parts have been changed. You can pause here again to check out the differences for yourself. But hey Peta, thanks so much for changing the beginning of the article so that people with autism don't now sound like monstrous burdens. And, removing the part about how you guys thought that dairy products actually caused autism, like the typical stupid anti-vaccination freaks. Because I don't want to get too bogged down with scientific explanations though, The Atlantic gave a helpful summary back in 2014. The problem, other than the offensive play on the "Got Milk" slogan, is that the research available has been discredited by at least 2 independent overviews. A 2010 overview by the University of Texas at Austin of 14 studies on the link between autism and casein and gluten-free diets found that the overall study quality was poor, and only the least scientific studies implied the diet improved behaviour. 2 additional overviews from 2008 and April 2014 found similar results and called for a large-scale, good-quality randomised survey. Peta cites a study with a grand total of 20 participants. Peta trampled all over people with autism and tried to terrify the parents and guardians of children with autism, all to push their vegan agenda. They started out by demonising people with autism and guilt-tripping parents and guardians into thinking that giving their children dairy products caused autism. But now they're still preying on the naive, because that second article is still right up there on their website. But that's the worst that Pettus done, right? They can't have possibly been any more bigoted than that, can they? It's not like they tried comparing animal rights to literal slavery, did they? We all know about the 13th Amendment and the abolition of slavery in the US. It's deadly serious. Peta, of course, tried to use the 13th Amendment to say that orcas are slaves. Literal slaves that should be protected by the 13th Amendment. In the first case of its kind, Peta, 3 marine mammal experts and 2 former orca trainers are filing a lawsuit asking a federal court to declare that 5 wild-caught orcas forced to perform at SeaWorld are being held as slaves in violation of the 13th Amendment to the US Constitution. The filing, the first ever seeking to apply the 13th Amendment to non-human animals, names the 5 orcas as plaintiffs and also seeks their release to their natural habitats and seaside sanctuaries. The suit is based on the plain text of the 13th Amendment, which prohibits the condition of slavery without reference to person or any particular class of victim. Slavery is slavery, and it does not depend on the species of the slave any more than it depends on gender, race or religion, says General Counsel to Peta, Jeffrey Kerr. And from further into the article, all 5 of these orcas were violently seized from the ocean and taken from their families as babies. They are denied freedom and everything else that is natural and important to them while kept in small concrete tanks and reduced to performing stupid tricks, says Peta President Ingrid E. Newkirk. The 13th Amendment prohibits slavery, and these orcas are, by definition, slaves. As much as I personally don't want orcas to suffer, comparing sea mammals to the black men, women and children that were enslaved, beaten, raped and murdered is outrageously offensive. Anyone can care about animals. They should. Anyone can argue that animals should have the same rights as humans do if they want. But to drag up literal slavery, and even pretend that animals in an abusive environment are equal to slaves is unthinkable. But hey, it's fine to undermine racism for animals now, I suppose. Naturally, the judge threw out that ridiculous lawsuit. But let's be honest, there's no real "that person is laughing at racism enough" moment until someone decides to drag up Martin Luther King Jr. in the most offensive way possible. On 2014's Martin Luther King Jr. Day, Peta decided to write an article with quotes from the man himself, starting with the line, "The fate of animals today is similar to that of humans who are subjected to slavery and other civil rights injustices. They, too, are tortured, abused, and neglected, as humans once were and sometimes still are." And then, to add insult to injury, they thought that it would be a great idea to take one of Dr. King's quotes about the Holocaust and then superimpose that over a fairly graphic image of dead pigs. Because whilst Dr. King was talking about how there were, and are, let's be honest, laws that support racism, accurately invoking the Holocaust to tie the struggle of black and Jewish people together, Peta just had to spit in Dr. King's face, the faces of every black individual that suffers racism, and every Jewish person's face that was tortured or family murdered in the Holocaust. It would have been bad enough to put any animal in there. But pigs, really, and a quote about the Holocaust. Peta has absolutely no shame. Oh, but don't worry, the racism isn't over yet. It's bad enough that Peta unironically tried to co-opt and belittle the very serious struggle against white supremacy by claiming that somehow milk is a sign of white supremacy. But it isn't just slavery that Peta is abused. I'm going to be blurring these images, but that's right. Peta literally used pictures of Holocaust victims. Those billboards were so vile that the German Constitutional Court banned them, accurately stating that the campaign made the fate of the victims of the Holocaust appear banal and trivial. Peta doubled down to say that it was fair to compare animals to the men, women and children murdered by Nazis, because they're that disgusting an organisation. You could argue that those are old tactics, but the fact is that Peta stands by what they say and do. Back in 2014, 10 years after the Holocaust abusing campaign, someone tweeted, "Only recently became aware of this Peta campaign from 2003. So far over the line, hate them even more now." Where Peta replied, "The very same mindset that made the Holocaust possible is what allows us to commit atrocities against animals every single day." So there's no remorse, no care. Victims of the Holocaust are just pawns to use. The memory of slavery and the lived experiences of minorities that suffer racism don't matter to Peta. At this point, I could also mention their horrendously disgusting response to Karl Lagerfeld's death just to get themselves attention, but if I covered every gross thing that Peta has said, I would be here literally all day. It's never ending. But okay, I can already sense the Varys in the comments saying that even though Peta has gross campaigns and says disgusting things, at least they're helping animals, right? Maybe some of you can ignore all of those horrible examples and all the examples that I don't have time to cover, because the actual living animals that Peta helps are the most important thing. Well, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news for those people, but the truth is that Peta is an animal murdering organisation. In the state of Virginia alone, Peta was given 2,512 animals. Out of those 2,512 animals, Peta euthanized 1,798. Only 45 were adopted. 45. In 1 year. In one single US state. Since the second half of 1998, Peta has euthanized almost 40,000 animals. On average, they kill about 85% of the animals that go through their doors. There are links below that give you more information if you want to research further into this for yourself. But for anyone that might think that Peta euthanizes because they're given animals that are sick and that they're really just trying to do the right thing, then we really need to talk about the case of Peta and Maya, the Chihuahua. Maya was owned by Cynthia Zarate, a 9-year-old girl, which her father, Wilbur Zarate, bought her for Christmas. The owner of the mobile home park where Wilbur and Cynthia lived called Peta in to remove strays around the area. 2 Peta representatives spotted Maya, who was unleashed and unattended. As you can see in this video, they backed up their van onto the Zarate's property and kidnapped Maya. Now, fair's fair. If they came to remove stray animals and saw an animal that looked like a stray, it makes sense that they would pick Maya the Chihuahua. Mistakes happen, and our owners should have been more careful. But Virginia law states that stray animals have to be kept for 5 days before they can be euthanized. Peta kidnapped Maya and killed her on the very same day. The Zarates claimed that Peta denied taking Maya at first until this footage was shown, and then Peta claimed that it was all a terrible mistake. Wilbur Zarate then took Peta to court, suing for millions of dollars in damages. What was Peta's response? Broken down into the most simple terms by a critic of Peta, Peta tells the court that Maya was worthless and therefore they can't be financially liable to the family, that, at best, the dog had no value beyond the cost of replacement for another dog. They had permission by the property owner to remove community cats, so they cannot be guilty of trespass for entering and killing a dog, and the family is not entitled to punitive damages because Peta's theft and immediate killing of a happy, healthy, beloved dog is not outrageous conduct. Moreover, in an argument reeking with racial overtones, they asked the court to find out if the Spanish-speaking person whose dog they stole and killed is legally in the US. So not only did the supposed animal rights organization tell a court that a dog was worthless and only worth the replacement fee for another dog, they wanted to try and force a court to find out whether the Zarates were legal US citizens for the sole reason that they were Hispanic. That level of racism is horrendous. Not only did Peta presume that a family must be illegal because of their heritage and language, but they clearly hoped to frighten the family into dropping the lawsuit over that kind of threat. The court completely ignored that, thankfully, and eventually Peta were fined $500 by the state of Virginia for breaking the euthanasia law, but also settled with the family before the trial began, giving them $49,000. But alright, if you want to push that racism to one side and argue that Peta's lawyers are gross and that Peta itself only made a mistake with Maya, then you will be shocked to discover that when Maya was kidnapped and killed, Peta also killed 2 kittens, 1 puppy and 2 other dogs that very same day, according to Peta's own records. If that isn't enough though, there are the words of an ex-Peta employee. I'll read out some of the snippets of the worst behaviours that Peta is alleged to engage in. If you're skeptical, then there's also a link below where the ex-employee shows off Peta giving her positive work reviews. In the beginning, I wanted to adopt out the majority of animals I brought in, and sometimes I neglected to report when I picked up an animal. In doing so, I could bring them to a local shelter because the alternative was euthanasia at Peta. I was not yet a true believer. Even after I became a true believer, there were certain animals I knew I could easily place, for whom I requested an adoption green light. A few times I was successful in my requests, but I had to fight hard for each adoption and, increasingly, I encountered great resistance. I heard phrases like a waste of resources and not adoptable. My desire to save each animal was belittled as naive and trivial. I was told that I was missing the bigger picture. I remember one day bringing a tiny white dog into Ingrid's office to tell her that I wanted to adopt her out, not euthanize her. She rolled her eyes and asked why that dog was any more worthy than any of the countless other animals in shelters waiting for a home. I told her she was an adoptable dog, small, social, sweet, and could be placed with very little trouble. After sarcastically berating me, with a smile on her face, she turned to a man in her office and asked what he thought. He said she was very cute. She sighed and said something along the lines of, "Fine, do what you want." So I found her a home. As a side note, Ingrid is Ingrid E. Newkirk, the president of Peta. Allegedly. Let me be clear, there was no shelter at Peta when I was there. What was referred to as the shelter was a large empty storage closet across from our office. The only other holding facility we had was in the warehouse, where animals were euthanized. And when I did use the room across from my office as a holding area for animals, Ingrid would ask why I hadn't already euthanized them, one time nailing me to the wall because of the litter of puppies I'd placed in there for a night had pooped everywhere. I was told to euthanize the puppies immediately. Needless to say, Ingrid refused our request for a shelter. Waste of resources, not the aim of the programme, animals beyond hope, same old, same old. And possibly the most shocking allegations. I was told regularly to not enter animals into the log or to euthanize off-site in order to prevent animals from even entering the building. I was told regularly to greatly overestimate the weight of animals whose euthanasia we recorded in order to account for what would have otherwise been missing blue juice, the chemical used to euthanize, because that allowed us to euthanize animals off the books. I was told regularly to say whatever I had to say in order to get people to surrender animals to me. Lying was not only acceptable, it was encouraged. Those aren't the actions of an organisation that is taking sick animals in and euthanizing them humanely to end their suffering. Those are the actions of an organisation that doesn't care about animals and manipulates the law to kill as many as possible in secret. They're an evil organisation, and this is just scratching the surface of what they've done. Or alleged to have done, I suppose. I highly recommend going to do your own research, because there is just too much to cover in one video. But okay, maybe now you understand that Peta is a disgusting organisation that should never be supported, but you think, okay Elle, they're disgusting, but Peta's Beauty Without Bunnies programme is the biggest programme out there to help consumers figure out which brands are cruelty-free. And, in fairness, you would be right. Peta has certified over 3,800 brands as cruelty-free. A lot of brands work with them. But what checks and balances does Peta have in place to ensure that companies that they list as cruelty-free are actually cruelty-free? Let's read their FAQ. How does a company get on the list? Company representatives interested in having their company's name added to our cruelty-free lists must complete a short questionnaire and sign a statement of assurance verifying that they do not conduct, commission or pay for any tests on animals for ingredients, formulations or finished products, and that they pledge not to do so in the future. Peta will then add qualifying companies to our pocket-sized cruelty-free shopping guide, our shopping guide brochure and our online searchable database of cruelty-free companies. How does a company license Peta's cruelty-free logo? Once certified as cruelty-free, companies also have the opportunity to share their cruelty-free commitment with consumers by licensing our cruelty-free bunny logo for use on product labels and promotional materials. This step helps consumers identify cruelty-free products at a glance while shopping. For a one-time licensing fee of $100, our logo may be used on companies' products, literature, in-store displays and websites. To meet individual design needs, the logo may be used in any colour combination or in black and white. For companies that sell an entirely vegan product line, a version that reads cruelty-free and vegan is also available. How do I know these companies really don't test on animals? Companies are putting their integrity on the line when they respond to consumers. A company that has publicly announced an end to tests on animals and states in writing that it doesn't test on animals would face a public relations disaster and potential lawsuits if it was caught lying. Alright, we need to stop a second, because those questions and answers are some of the most embarrassingly terrible that I've ever heard. I like philosophy, so how about a quick thought experiment? Let's say that there's a brand that tests on animals, but wants consumers to think that they don't. Let's say that they're gross and want to claim to be cruelty-free for some good publicity and more sales. All that they have to do is contact Peta, pinky swear that they're cruelty-free, they really do promise, and then send Peta $100 to use the Beauty Without Bunnies logo. And Peta is fine with that. But wait, that would never happen, according to Peta, because that would be a PR disaster, and there could be some lawsuits if that happened. It's all about brand integrity, and brands aren't going to want to lose their integrity. It's not as though brands have been caught lying or behaving badly before, right? It's ridiculous. Peta doesn't check out the companies themselves. They don't inspect factories, and they don't have any real power or information aside from what the companies provide. Their logo is absolutely worthless, and they've managed to con the public into believing that it's an important sign to look out for. You'd think that it would just be worthless because of how easy it is for a brand to be added to the list, but you'd be wrong. I present to you possibly the most infuriatingly manipulative use of a Peta logo courtesy of Me My Makeup. Me My are cruelty-free and vegan, with exclusions. Obviously, it's only fair to check their FAQ in case there's something obvious that's been missed. Are your products vegan? The Me My range is vegan, with the exception of our Miracle Moisturiser and Define and Shape Contour Duo, which both contain beeswax. So, no, they're not vegan. Unless it's also fair to say that bacon sandwiches are entirely vegan too. I mean, bacon sandwiches are vegan with the exception of the bacon, so vegan with exceptions? But seriously, either Peta are so incompetent that they don't keep an eye on brands that use their logos, which makes them look stupid, or they care more about me paying them that $100 for extra exposure for themselves to exploit animals. So much for them demanding ethical treatment. It doesn't end there though. A blogger called Cruelty-Free Kitty made a post back on the 22nd of May 2018 proving just how unreliable Pettus' cruelty-free list actually is. A hair care company called Rusk is Peta certified, but these are the emails between Cruelty-Free Kitty and a member of Rusk's team. I'll let you pause to read them. But basically, the part where Rusk admits that they can't control whether other countries, like China, demand animal testing, that shows that they aren't cruelty-free. But they're still on Peta's cruelty-free list. So much for Peta saying that brands wouldn't claim to be something that they weren't, right? Remember, Peta didn't add any of the brands to their Beauty Without Bunnies program themselves. Brands have to sign up to it themselves and pay Peta $100 for the privilege of using their logo. The brands are the ones that chase Peta, not the other way around. With Peta being as well known as they are, brands can lie to claim to be cruelty-free and Peta just doesn't care. It's difficult to figure out whether brands are truly cruelty-free or not because really you just have to take their word for it. But if you want to look for a list of truly cruelty-free brands, the best that seems to be out there is Leaping Bunny. From their FAQ, what is the Leaping Bunny standard? The standard is short for the Corporate Standard of Compassion for Animals, a voluntary pledge that cosmetic, personal care and or household product companies make to clear animal testing from all stages of product development. The company's ingredient suppliers make the same pledge and the result is a product guaranteed to be 100% free of new animal testing. All Leaping Bunny companies must be open to independent audits and commitments are renewed on an annual basis. Basically, Leaping Bunny does what Peta refuses to do. Even though Peta is worth over $56 million, it's Leaping Bunny that checks up on businesses, demands actual paperwork, and makes sure that brands keep to their standards. Like Peta though, there's a fee for brands to use the Leaping Bunny's logo, so there will be brands out there that are Leaping Bunny certified but won't have a cruelty-free logo on their products. The only thing that you can do is to go onto the Leaping Bunny website and search for the company to check their status for yourself. I'd say that you could check Peta's site the same way, but by now you know exactly how worthless that is. But brands will know how worthless it is too. We know the drill by now. This is the scandal. Brands are pandering, proclaiming how much they care about animals and are lazily signing up to Peta to help increase Peta's clout and con people into believing that Peta is a good cause to support. How brands can pretend to be horrified by bad influencer behaviour, yet happily seek out and work with a racist organisation that murders animals just because they're well known is beyond me. They should be absolutely ashamed. As always, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, or don't do any of those things because I'm not your mother. And, as we say in The Sims, dag dag.